Hey, with the new Odoo v3 Alpha 1 version out, I would like to walk you through an end-to-end use case of Odoo. Odoo is a fast and iterative command line tool for developers who want to write, build, test, and deploy their application in a production-like cloud-native environment such as Kubernetes and OpenShift, and to do so without diving deep into the complex Kubernetes configuration files and focusing on what matters the most, your code. For our first use case, I'm a developer who wants to onboard my project to Odoo with Devfile. Odoo uses an open standard known as Devfile. It is a configuration file that defines the structure of a project by defining components that are needed to be created and commands with instructions on how to create those components and operate on them. As a new Odoo user, we do not expect you to interact with the dev file. As you run various Odoo commands, the necessary changes will be made to the dev file. But as you advance, you can modify the dev file to your preference and unleash all the superpowers that it has to offer to you. Every project, depending on the language type, will have a different dev file, which can be fetched from the dev file registry. The dev file registry supports a wide variety of languages out of the box. But in case your language is not available, you can use any of these dev files as a reference and write your own dev file. You can find more information on this on the devfile.io website. For our use case, I am going to use a simple Node.js application. It has a single server.js file which defines the main logic of the project and a Docker file with instructions on building an image for the project. We'll first begin by cloning this repository locally. I'm going to use a Minikube cluster for this. So let's check the status of it. It is running good. Uh, so the first thing I need here is a dev file. So we'll run the odoo init command, which will analyze our project and determine the suitable dev file for it. In this case, it is Node.js, which it will fetch from the registry, my registry. If you run Odoo preference registry list, you see a list of registries that Odoo can use to fetch the dev files from. For now, this is correct, so we'll hit yes. It is now downloading the dev file. So the current configuration of our dev file is there is a container called runtime with 3000 as an open port. This configuration is fine for now, so we'll just move on. I'm going to override the default component name with sample node.js. So our dev file is now ready. Let us take a quick look at this before moving on. We'll begin with the components first. There is a container type component defined here with the name runtime, and it has endpoints here, and it will use this image to create the container. We have commands over here. All of these commands belong to the component runtime. There is npm install to install the dependencies on the container, npm start to start the server, npm run debug, and npm test for debugging and testing. There is metadata about the dev file available over here. The name is sample node.js that we set earlier. Uh, Now that we have dev file, we are ready to begin with our inner loop development cycle. For that, I will run the odoo dev command. It will create all the necessary Kubernetes resources. We see that a pod is now running. Let us check its logs. uh, Odoo created the resources, it synced the files from local system to the cluster, it built an application, and it is using port forwarding to forward any requests coming on port 3000 on the cluster to port 40001 on our local system. So let's first check this URL, and we see a message from our Node.js application, which is well and good. But the next thing I want to do is modify this message. So I'll open up the server.js file and change this message to say hello from the new Node.js starter application. As I hit save, Odoo detected changes in the server.js file and it is now syncing them and building the application again. So if we check this again, we see a new message, which is good. For now, I think I'm okay with this change. So I'll hit Control C and stop the Odoo dev command, which will delete the resources. Let's first add the changes that we have so far and commit them. Now we are ready to begin with our outer loop development cycle. But before we move further, you should know that as of now, components for the outer loop development cycle are only supported by Devfile 2.2.0, which is not available out of the box from the Devfile registry. You will need to modify the Devfile in order to use it for outer loop or set up your own registry with 2.2.0 dev files. For now, we'll use the dev file that we have defined here. Um, okay, so this is the raw version of it. This dev file is simply an extension of what we have here. Let us take a look at the changes that were made. So we added a new image type component with instructions on building an image out of this local Docker file, and it will push the image to this key.io registry. We are also adding a Kubernetes type component, which will create a deployment and use the image that we will be building. And we're adding another Kubernetes component to create a load balancer service to expose the deployment that we had here. I've added external IPs since I'm using a local Minikube cluster. This is the Minikube IP. We've added commands on how to create and work with the components that we've added. There is a build image command, one for deployment, one for service, and this is the order in which they will be run. So we'll first build the image, then create the deployment, and then create the service. So let's hit save, and we'll run the auto deploy command to begin with the outer loop cycle. It has built the image locally and it is now pushing it to the container registry. We'll wait for that to happen. We see that it pushed the image to the registry, created the Kubernetes resources. Pod is coming up. We can run odo list to check the status of our component. So we see that it is currently running in the deploy mode on the cluster, and the name of it is sample node.js as the name of our dev file. Our pod is up and running, so let's fetch the service and get. Oh, okay, first let's check the logs of this to make sure that it is running. Okay, it seems like our app is ready to run. We'll use this external IP. Our application is available on the port 3000, so we'll hit that. All right, so we can see the message. That's good. Before we move on, I would like to delete the resources from the cluster. So we'll run auto delete component, which will delete the resources related to this component. In this case, it is correct. So now let's add the changes and we'll push them. So this brings an end to our outer loop development, our first use case. Now, moving on to the second use case, we have a developer who wants to quickly do a bug fix in a project that has a dev file. So even for our second use case, we will be using our sample node.js project. We now see that it has a dev file, so this project is good to go. We'll do a fresh clone. Um, yeah, so well, that is happening. Okay, so let's move there. I'll first run the odo dev command to see what's going on in the application. We'll wait for it to be up. Our application is up and we will use this URL to access it. Okay, so we see a message from our Node.js application. That's nice. But I see that something is wrong here and I would like to fix it. For that, let us open up the server.js file and fix the message to say hello from the new Node.js starter application. And I hit save. I see Odo detecting changes here and rebuilding the application. I'll wait for that to happen. Okay, so if I hit reload, I see the new message. That's nice. I'm satisfied with this for now. So let's hit Control C and end this command. I'll quickly check out my changes into the new branch and I can push them. So this brings an end to our second use case. Uh, that is it for today. For more information, you can visit the odo.dev website. I encourage you to try Odo and let us know if you like it. Thank you.